Hello guys, I'm your friend and FSS guide Sagar Shirke and thank you so much for watching this video. और आज हम डिस्कस करने वाले हैं कि फूड सेफ्टी इनटू द प्रोसेस चेन. Your FSS guide food technology Sagar Shirke sign in. Thank you so much for watching this channel and please like, share and subscribe. चलिए शुरू करते हैं आज का जो वीडियो है हमारा वो हम शुरू करते हैं. तो कंटेंट में होगा व्हाट इज फूड सेफ्टी, व्हाट इज द फूड सप्लाई चेन. इसके अंदर हम फूड सप्लाई चेन बारे में डिस्कस करेंगे. द फूड सप्लाई कंसिस्ट ऑफ द फोर मेजर पार्ट्स नेमली, इसके बारे में चर्चा करेंगे. मूवमेंट्स ऑफ फूड एंड मनी इन अ सिंपल फूड सप्लाई चेन एंड ओवरव्यू ऑफ फूड चेन, फूड वेब, types of food chain, food safety regulation in globalized world, internationally recognized food safety organizations certifications program included, and the seven principles of safe food supply chain. तो देखिए फूड सेफ्टी दैट इज व्हाट इज द फूड सेफ्टी. तो फूड सेफ्टी इज रेफर्स टू द रूटीन in the preparation, handling, and storage of the food meant to prevent foodborne illness and injury from farm to factory. Farm to factory के अंदर and to fork food products may encounter any number of health hazard during their journey through the supply chain. Safe food handling practices and procedures are thus implemented at every stage of the food production life cycle in order to curb these risks and prevent harm to consumer. ठीक है, तो फूड सेफ्टी के अंदर फार्म टू फोक, जो फार्म टू फैक्ट्री टू फोक, इसके अंदर जो प्रोसेसेस है उसके अंदर फूड बॉर्न इलनेसेस, फूड बॉर्न डिसीजेस जो है वो इनकाउंटर हो सकते हैं. तो उसे प्रिवेंट करने के लिए सेफ्टी जरूरी है और उसी को कहा जाता है फूड सेफ्टी. देन फूड सेफ्टी द फॉलोइंग articles defines food safety is manufacturing and explains the importance of food safety for the global food chain, following a brief overview of the different regulatory bodies tasked with evaluating food safety around the world. The article outlines the key principles of effective food safety regulation, the history of food safety, and the consequences of unsafe food handling practices and procedures for companies and consumers. ठीक है. Then what is the food supply chain? The food supply chain is the food supply chain or food system refers to the process that describes the how food form or farmed ends up on our tables. The process include production, processing, distribution, consumption and disposal. ठीक है, तो ये सारी जो प्रोसीजर्स है वो फूड सप्लाई चेन के अंदर आती है. द फूड वी ईट reaches us via food supply chain through which food moves systematically in. ठीक है, तो उसे फूड सप्लाई चेन किया जाता है in dominoes like motion from producer to consumers, while the money consumers pay for food goes to people who work at various stages along the food supply chain in the reserved direction. ठीक है, every step of the supply chain requires human and or natural resources. ठीक है, because of food supply chain, a domino like when one part of the food supply chain is affected, the whole food supply chain is affected, which is often manifested through changes in price. Then food supply chain consists of the four major parts, namely उसके अंदर है the sun, producer, consumer and decomposer. The sun is the initial source of energy which provides energy for everything on the planet. ठीक है. Then the producer in the food supply chain includes the autotrophs such as plankton, cyanobacteria, algae, green. उसके बाद consumers are all organisms that are depends on plants or other organisms for food. This is the largest. ठीक है, उसके बाद है decomposer are the organisms that get energy from dead or waste organic material. This is the last stage in a food chain. Key SCM concept, उसके अंदर है raw material, component, manufacturer, retailer, consumer. So the key components of SCM. ठीक है, so and then is the food supply chain. What is the vocabulary? The food supply chain: production, producer, processing, processor, transporter, ठीक है, रिटेलर, रिटेलिंग कंज्यूमर, कंज्यूमर डिस्पोजर, रिसोर्सेज, तो ये आप तो ऑलरेडी जानते हो। तो बैकग्राउंड अगर देखा जाए तो इन द फूड सप्लाई चेन फूड मूव्स फ्रॉम प्रोड्यूसर टू कंज्यूमर वाया द प्रोसेस of production, processing, distribution, retailing, and consumption. Thus, food moves from farmer to consumer in a domino-like fashion. At the same time, money that consumers pay for food moves from consumer to producer. In the reserve process, again in a domino-like fashion, from consumer to retailer, to distributor to processor to farmer. Thus, the two-sided causality that connects farmer and consumers is mediated by these two sets of domino causality. वो तो आप जानते हो कि फूड सप्लाई चेन के अंदर कैसे होता है, प्रोड्यूसर, रिटेलर, डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर, so like that. Then movement of food and money in a simple food. So here you can understand the real fact of this thing. So yes, the movement of food supply, movements of food and money in a simple food supply chain, that is farmer, processor, distributor, retailer and consumer. The movement of food, movement of money, ठीक है, तो ये आप जानते हो, दिस इज अ रिवर्स प्रोसेस. In addition, both movement of food and money are facilitated by pulls and pushes in a food supply chain. Producer and processor push or supply food and consumer pull or demand food, ठीक है, thereby facilitate the dominoes food to fall move towards the consumer. Similarly to producers, ठीक है, the farmers, processor, distributor, retailer एंड कंज्यूमर, तो ये फूड सप्लाई चेन है, जो मूवमेंट ऑफ फूड एंड मूवमेंट ऑफ मनी के थ्रू होता है. देन एन ओवरव्यू ऑफ फूड चेन, द टेबल ऑफ कंटेंट, व्हाट इज अ फूड चेन. सेकंड is the food web, the types of food chain and the conclusion. Frequently asked questions वो हम लेंगे and let's start. Food chain introduction is the food chain explains which organism is another organism in the environment. The food chain is a linear sequence of the organism where nutrients and energy is transferred from one organism to the other. This occurs when one organism consumes another organism. It begins with producer organism, follows the chain, and ends with the decomposer organism. After understanding the food chain, we realize how one organism is dependent upon another species of survival. Okay. Now let's look at the another aspects of the food chain to get the better understanding. तो आप जानते हो कि एक जो ऑर्गेनिज्म होता है वो अनदर ऑर्गेनिज्म के ऊपर जो फूड डोमेन होता है, वो तो आप जानती हो कि ये ही होती है फूड चेन, ठीक है. Then what is a food chain? Food chain is a refers to the order of events is in an ecosystem where one living organism is another organism and later that organism is consumed by another larger organism. The flow of nutrients and energy from one organism to another at the different trophic levels form a food chain. The food chain also explains the feeding pattern on the relationship between living organisms. Trophic level refers to the sequential stages in a food chain, starting with producer at the bottom, followed by the primary, secondary, and tertiary consumers. Every level in a food chain is known as a trophic level. Then, an overview of a food chain. तो the food chain consists of the four major parts, namely the sun, जैसे कि हमने अभी चेक किया कि the sun is the initial source of energy which provides energy for everything on the planet. हर planet के ऊपर जो energy का source है वो sun है. Then producer, the producer is the food chain include all autotrophs such as phytoplankton, cyanobacteria, algae, green plants. These is the first stage in food chain. The producers make up the first level of a food chain. The producers utilizes the energy from the sun to make food. Producers are also known as autotrophs as they make their own food. Producers are any planet or plant or other organisms that produces their own nutrients through photosynthesis. For example, green plants, phytoplankton, and algae are some examples of producers in a food chain. जो आप जानते हो कि जो फूड चेन के अंदर है, प्लांट के अंदर, कि जो फोटोसिंथेसिस के थ्रू ये जो प्लांट का जो फूड है, प्लांट जो है वो फूड बनाती है, दैट यू नो. then है consumer, an overview of food chain के अंदर, then consumer, third is a consumer are all organisms that are dependent on plants or other organisms for food. This is the largest part of a food web as it contains almost all living organisms. It includes herbivores, which are animals that eat plants, carnivores, which are animals that eat other animals. Parasites are those organisms that live on other organisms by harming them. And lastly, the scavengers, which are animals that eat dead animals. ठीक है, तो उन्हें scavengers कहा जाता है, and the carcasses that you know already. ठीक है. Then herbivores are known as the primary consumers and carnivores are secondary consumers. जो carnivores जो होते हैं उन्हें secondary consumers कहा जाता है, और जो herbivores होते हैं that you know those are the primary consumers. Then the second trophic level includes organisms that it produces. Therefore, primary consumers are herbivores are organisms in the second trophic level. Then last is the decomposer. Decomposer are the organisms that get energy from dead or waste organic material. This is the last stage in a food chain. Okay. Decomposers are the integral part of the food chain as they convert organic waste material into the inorganic material like nutrient rich soil and land. Decomposers complete a life cycle. They help in recycling the nutrients as they provide nutrients to soil or oceans that can be utilized by autotrophs or प्रोड्यूसर्स द स्टार्टिंग अ होल न्यू फूड चेन. ठीक है. अब देन देखिए फूड वेब के अंदर क्या आता है, सेवरल इंटरकनेक्टेड फूड चेन फॉर्म a food web. A food web is a similar to a food chain, but the food web is a comparatively larger than a food chain. ठीक है. Occasionally, a single organism is consumed by many predators, or it consumes a several other organisms. Due to this, many trophic levels get interconnected. The food chain fails to showcase the flow of energy in the right way. So, देखिए, but the food web is able to show the proper representation of energy flow as it displays the interaction between different organisms. ठीक है. Then, when there are the more cross interactions between different food chains, the food web gets more complex. This complexity is a food web leads to a more sustainability in the ecosystem. ठीक है. Then types of food chain इसके अंदर हम देखेंगे there are the two types of food chain. First is the detritus food chain. The detritus food chain includes the different species of the organisms and plants like algae, bacteria, fungi, protozoa, mites, and insects, worms, and so on. The detritus food chain begins with the dead organic material. Then the grazing food chain. The grazing food chain is a type of food chain that starts with green plants, passes through herbivorous, and then to carnivorous. In this type of food chain, the first energy transfer is from plant to herbivores. Then a foods safety regulation in globalized world. So देखिए every country has a different regulatory bodies that preside over the definition and enforcement of domestic food chain standards. In order to sell or manufacture food products in any given country, domestic and international businesses alike are subject to the food safety legislation and enforcement measures of the nations. In the European Union, for example, food safety legislation is detailed in Regulation EC 852. In the United States, the Food Safety Modernization Act. तो ठीक है, outline the legal requirement for food safety. तो हर जो ये कॉन्टिनेंट के ऊपर अलग अलग जो रेगुलेशन है, यूरोपियन यूनियन का अलग रेगुलेशन है, यूएस का अलग रेगुलेशन है, तो ऐसे ही अलग अलग रेगुलेशन है. ठीक है. Around the world, the majority of laws about food safety are based on two concepts, HACCP and GMP. HACCP और GMP ये जो दो मेजर फूड लॉज है जो फूड सेफ्टी के लिए ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा मतलब जो पकड़े जाते हैं, जैसे कि HACCP हजार्ड एनालिसिस क्रिटिकल कंट्रोल पॉइंट एंड GMP गुड मैन्युफैक्चरिंग प्रैक्टिसेस. ठीक है. तो इंटरनेशनल रिकॉग्नाइज्ड फूड सेफ्टी ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस एंड सर्टिफिकेशन प्रोग्राम आज हम इसके ऊपर डिस्कस करेंगे, जैसे कि IFS फूड 6.1, द IFS food standards, international food standards. Then है BRCGS, the British Retail Consortium ग्लोबल स्टैंडर्ड्स जो फॉर्मली बीआरसी उसको कहा जाता है. देन है एसक्यूएफ द सेफ क्वालिटी फूड इंस्टीट्यूट. देन एसक्यूएफ द फूड सेफ क्वालिटी फूड इंस्टीट्यूट. तो एचएससीपी के अंदर आप देख सकते हो जैसे कि पहले हजार्ड जो है वो आइडेंटिफाई किया जाता है, उसके बाद एनालिसिस किया जाता है, देन उसका क्रिटिकल लिमिट डिफाइन किया जाता है, फिर कंट्रोल किया जाता है एट द सिक्योर लेवल, एट द यू नो व्हाट, एट द कंजम्पशन, एट द सेफ लेवल उसको कंट्रोल किया जाता है, और उसके बाद वो पॉइंट्स कंसिडर किए जाते हैं. उसी का कहते हैं एचएससीपी. Then देखिए the seven principles of a food safe food supply chain. While the HSP has listed out the steps necessary to proactively ensure food quality safety in individual food production environments, a healthy supply chain also demands action on a collective level. The European Union identifies seven overreacting reaching food safety principles necessary for the entire supply chain, food supply chain, to operate for the public good. तो देखिए कॉर्पोरेट रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है, उसके बाद ट्रेसेबिलिटी है, देन ऑफिशियल फूड कंट्रोल्स है, देन द precautionary principle है, independent scientific risk assessment, separation of risk assessment and risk management, and then transparent risk communication. तो ये जो सेवन प्रिंसिपल्स है जो यूज किए जाते हैं फॉर सेफ फूड सप्लाई चेन. एंड आई होप आपको ये जो चैनल है, आपको ये जो इन्फॉर्मेशन है वो आपको बहुत पसंद आई होगी, एंड आई होप यू लाइक इट. that our today's topic was food safety into the process chain. तो आप ये टॉपिक कंप्लीटली सीख चुके होंगे, फूड सेफ्टी into the process chain. And thank you so much for watching this video, and please like, share and subscribe this channel, and please share this channel with your food technologist and your friend to understand more knowledge about this. And thank you so much for watching this channel. I'm your host and host, the Sagar Shir Capacity Guide, signing off. Thank you so much. Thank you.